insurance, this is Tony Cañas, and today I want to talk to you about The Alliance, a book by Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, that I read a few years ago and thought was absolutely fantastic. The Alliance deals with the way that the LinkedIn Corporation and a lot of Silicon Valley companies handle talent. The way that we manage talent today in the insurance industry really hasn't changed in a long time. It was designed for an age of stability and lifetime employment. I've worked for several insurance carriers in the last 10 years, and every time during the interviews, orientation process, and even beyond, both sides are expected to pretend that this job is forever. At the same time, in every one of those jobs, I was an at-will employee, and they made it very, very clear that they could fire me for any reason or without reason at any time. That's the fundamental disconnect of modern employment. The employer-employee relationship is based on a dishonest conversation. You pretend that you're hiring me for life and that I'm going to be doing this exact same job in this exact same department for life. I pretend to be excited about that, and I pretend that this job is the end-all be-all of everything I want to do in my life. The company asks the employee to commit to the company without committing to them in return. They used to, back in the day of pensions, back in the day of lifetime employment. Not really the case anymore. Maybe a little more with insurance, especially in mutual companies, definitely just not the case in the corporate world in general. The book makes the case that what we need is a new framework where we can make promises to each other that we can actually keep. The old model made sense for a time of stability. Maximizing employee security is a prime company goal. This is a quote by Earl Willis, GE manager of employee benefits back in 1962. For white-collar professionals, progressing your career at that time, back in the 50s and 60s, was like riding an escalator with predictable advancement for those who follow the rules. This is the world that the boomers and the Gen Xers were raised for. Because both sides expected the relationship to be permanent, both sides were willing to invest in each other for the long term. Then the world changed, both philosophically and technologically. The rise of shareholder capitalism in the 80s led companies to focus on hitting short-term financial targets to boost stock price, and long-term investment took a backseat to short-term cost-cutting measures. Around the same time, the information revolution globalized the business world, and companies like the big three American automakers found themselves competing with leaner, hungrier competitors from abroad. Adaptability and entrepreneurship became key to achieving sustainable success in business. This is a much closer approximation to the world that we live and work in today. Most companies try to become more flexible by reducing the employer-employee relationship to what's explicitly spelled out in legal and binding contracts, which is not much. This legalistic approach treats both employees and jobs as short-term commodities. Need to cut costs? No problem. Lay off employees. Need new competencies? No problem. Don't train your people. Just hire new ones. In the 1980s, a conference board survey found that 50% of executives believed, quote, employees who are loyal to the company and further its business goals deserve an assurance of continued employment. In 1990, just 10 years later, 6% believe the same thing. How many would believe it today in 2020? In the era of at-will employment, employees have learned to think of themselves as free agents, seeking the best opportunities and changing jobs whenever better offers appear. A Towers Watson 2012 global workforce study found that even though half of employees wanted to stay with their employers, most felt that they would have to take a job at a different company in order to advance their careers. As much as companies yearn for this stable environment and employees might yearn for lifetime employment, the world has simply changed, and trust in the business world is at an all-time low. A business without loyalty is a business without long-term thinking and unable to invest in the future. The old system is dead, but we can build a new type of loyalty that recognizes both the economic realities and allows companies and employees to commit to each other. Think about that. How awesome would that be to be able to get a real commitment from your employee, and as an employee, how awesome would that be to be able to get a real commitment from the company? So think of this new employment contract as an alliance, a mutually beneficial deal with explicit terms between independent players. In an alliance, the employer and employee develop a relationship based on how they can add value to each other. The agreement comes down to, you help us make our company more valuable, we'll make you more valuable. If you think of employees as free agents, the natural response is to slash training budgets, and we have certainly seen that in insurance. In an alliance, the manager can speak openly and honestly about the investment the company is willing to make in the employee and what it expects in return. How awesome would that be? Being able to honestly have that conversation. This is the investment we're willing to make in you, and this is what we need in return. The employee can speak honestly and openly about the type of growth that he or she seeks, specific skills, experiences, etc. Both sides can set clear expectations. This allows both parties to focus on maximizing medium and long-term benefits, creating a larger pie for all. That's what it's all about. It's about moving the conversation from short-term to medium and long-term benefit for both the company and the employee. Many companies like talking about we are a family. That metaphor is not great. In a family, you get to stay part of the family regardless of performance. It would be kind of heartless to cut you out of the family because your grades weren't up to par, because you didn't do your chores this week. Families are supposed to be unconditional. That is kind of the definition. In contrast, a professional sports team has a specific mission: to win games and championships. Its members come together to accomplish that mission. The composition of the team changes over time, either because a team member goes to another team from their own choice, or because the team's management decides to cut or trade a team member. Teams win when their individual members trust each other enough to prioritize team success over individual glory. Winning as a team is the best way for team members to achieve individual success in a properly running team. Members of winning teams are highly sought after by other teams, so it makes sense for players who understand that they need to make a future for themselves, potentially in a different team, to work their hardest to fit into the team's mission to win championships, to make themselves more valuable. So it becomes a win-win. In the old economy of stability, efficiency was the cardinal value. Employers placed employees on fixed tracks where they could develop ever higher degrees of specialization. Today, entrepreneurial thinking and doing is the most important capability companies need from their employees. The book aims to answer the following questions. How do I build trust and loyalty with my employees when I can't guarantee life and employment? How does the alliance apply to different types and levels of employees? How do I build a relationship with my entrepreneurial employees when our ultimate goals and values might differ? What kind of networking and personal brand building should I allow my employees to do in the workplace? The book is built on the concept of tours of duty. The essence of the tour of duty structure is regularly changing roles in the context of a long-term relationship. The tour of duty is an ethical commitment, not a contract, an ethical commitment by a manager and an employee to a specific mission. It incorporates some of the advantages from both lifetime employment and free agency. Like lifetime employment, the tour of duty allows employers and employees to build trust and mutual investment. Like free agency, it preserves the flexibility that both need to adapt in a rapidly changing world. By recasting careers at your company as a series of successive tours of duty, you can better attract and retain entrepreneurial employees. There's a natural worry. The tours of duty framework gives employees permission to leave, but the reality is permission is not yours to give. Believing that you have the power is simply you're deceiving yourself. It leads to a dishonest relationship with your employees. This framework gives a valued employee concrete and compelling reasons to stick it out and finish the tour of duty. Questions like, what job do you envision having after you leave the company, are crucial to this framework. The fundamental paradox of the tour of duty is that acknowledging that the employee might leave is actually the best way to build trust, and thus it develops the kind of relationship that convinces great people to stay. I think that is absolutely brilliant. Different types of tours. They vary based on the person, company, functional area, and job title. But there's three basic types. There's a rotational tour of duty. The rotational tour isn't personalized to the employee, and it tends to be highly interchangeable. Investment banks, management consultancies have for a long time defined 2 to 4 year analyst programs as their entry-level job. Those are great examples of a rotational tour. Underwriting training programs. Great examples of rotational tours. These programs are often explicit on-ramps to transition new employees from school to work or from a previous employer to the new employer's unique work environment. And they can apply to employees at all career stages. These tours are highly structured and they're programmatic. They focus on maximizing the current fit between an employee and his role rather than specifically grooming the employee for a different role. Then there are transformational tours of duty. Unlike the rotational tour, a transformational tour is deeply personalized. Focus is less on a fixed time period and more on the completion of a specific mission. Transformational tours of duty are negotiated one-on-one between the company and the employee. And the central promise is that the employee will have the opportunity to transform both his career and the company. As it enters its final stage, you and the employee can start negotiating a follow-up tour of duty to keep the employee at the company. And the assumption is that the goal is for a follow-up tour to happen at the same company, and that the employee agrees to give you first consideration, to give you the first conversation, to tell you that they're about ready to start talking to other companies so that you have the chance to sit down and help them figure out how to stay in the company, whether it makes sense. You never get blindsided by an employee leaving. How amazing would that be, managers? Making a real commitment allows an employee to accomplish something substantive. 5-year plan would look something like this. For the first year, they gain the important context for the role. The second year, they put their personal mark on the transformation. Years 3 to 5 are implementing and growing your success, or pivoting if some of the initial assumptions were wrong. As the relationship grows, follow-on transformational tours can be even longer in scope than 5 years. Transformational tours are a great way to offer employees meaningful internal mobility. And then finally, we have the foundational tour. Foundational tour is for people whose lives are fundamentally intertwined with their company. Think people like Steve Jobs at Apple, or nowadays John Ivey at Apple, or Warren Buffett at Berkshire Hathaway, where there is exceptional alignment of employer and employee. That is the hallmark of the foundational tour. If an employee sees working at the company as his last job, and the company wants the employee to stay until retirement, a fundamental tour of duty might make sense. The employee should see his life's work as the company's mission, and vice versa. And ideally, most of the top executives of a company should be on foundational tours. But this should not be restricted to senior management. You do want some people on foundational tours who are in the operational space, who are in the middle of the company, because those people provide the company with continuity and with institutional memory. Huge thing in our industry. They are the stewards of the company's way and the emotional foundation of the business. A foundational employee would never allow the company to cut corners in order to meet short-term financial goals. Think of a foundational tour as a form of marriage. Both parties expect it to be permanent and assume a moral obligation to try to make it work, try their best to make it work. Transformational tour is very unlikely to be your first tour at a particular company. Entry-level employees should start with a rotational or a transformational tour, not with a foundational one. Many star employees refuse foundational tours precisely because their career aspirations are so high. If your goal is to be CEO, the CEO role, when you're ready for it, goes to somebody else, you're gonna say no to the foundational tour. You're gonna go do it somewhere else. In summary, rotational tours provide scalability by helping companies hire large numbers of employees into stable, well-understood roles, and the standardized nature of these roles makes them easier to implement and recruit for at scale. The transformational tours provide adaptability by helping companies bring in specific skills and experiences as required. And finally, foundational tools provide continuity. Transformational tours are the ones that depart the most from the traditional way that companies are managed. So the book spends the rest of the book, I only went through about half of the book here. The book spends the rest of its pages in really digging into the transformational tours. So I highly, highly, highly recommend this book. Whether you are leading a company or whether you're just a manager, or even if you're just an individual contributor, read this book. Let's start bringing these ideas into insurance, because I think that we could do so much better in managing our talent. Thank you.